This is SBS World News with Janice Peterson.
Good evening. The death toll in Türkiye following last week's earthquakes has now passed 30,000, while it's confirmed almost 6,000 lives are lost in Syria. Rescues are becoming all the more miraculous, the most recent after 198 hours. But that phase is now coming to a close, with the UN looking firmly at the vast humanitarian aid effort ahead.
A concrete wasteland. Entire neighbourhoods razed to the ground, homes pulverised into piles of rubble. Excavators finishing the job ahead of what will be a mammoth rebuilding program. Hatay was one of Türkiye's worst-hit provinces, and beneath the rubble, survivors are still emerging. This 13-year-old boy was trapped for 182 hours. Pushing the limit of what the human body can withstand, his rescuers comforting him as he was carried to a waiting ambulance. It's these heartening moments of hope rescuers cling to. More than a week on, that beacon continues to fade, but the elation is incomparable when the miraculous occurs. God is great, they hail. This little girl was trapped for 178 hours. Her name is Miray. Her sister is still missing. Across Türkiye and Syria, survivors are still coming to grips with the devastating scale of destruction. The desperate need for permanent shelter on display everywhere, as is the simmering anger.
Yani iyi yerleşim yeri yapılsın, denetim yapılsın. Yani insan yaşamı hiçe sayılıyor buralarda. İnsan değeri yok sanki buralarda. Bilmiyorum, en son buralara gelildi. Bilemiyorum yani. Yani biz duyuramadık sesimizi artık. Yapacak bir şeyimiz kalmadı yani.
While grateful residents pour through donations in some areas, frustration is growing in others, with aid slow to trickle in.
İlk 3 gün zaten hiçbir yardım, hiçbir şey gelmedi. Yani işler acısı geçti. 3. günün akşamından sonra yardımlar, gıdalar ve ekipmanlar gelmeye başladı. Zaten iş işten geçmişti artık.
Durumumuz çok kötü, üşüyoruz, cami avlusunda yatıyoruz, barınma yeri bulamıyoruz, su yok, elektrik yok. Çocuklarımız hepsi hasta. Yani hiçbir yere gidemiyoruz, korkudan eve giremiyoruz. Yiyecek bir şeyimiz kalmadı.
In this Syrian city, people queue desperate for assistance, only to be left wanting.
جيت مرتين ثلاثة بسم الله خجلت يعني شيء يعني كأنك عم تشحدي والله شو بدي أحكي هيك يعني.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has agreed to allow United Nations aid deliveries to opposition-held northwest Syria through 2 border crossings from Türkiye for 3 months.
The rescue phase is dragging live people out from the rubble and finding those who died in the rubble. That's coming to a close, and now the humanitarian phase, the urgency of providing shelter, psychosocial care, food, schooling, and a sense of the future for these people, that's our obligation now.
The road ahead is fractured and the task immense, not least for the survivors. This man lost his wife and 2 children, combing through the rubble in search of any belongings he can salvage.
بس كلام قال ضل حسب الطبيب الشرعي اللبناني ضل ثاني يوم لحتى ما ينزل.
Once ordinary items unlocking precious memories to be held dear in a landscape of unimaginable loss. Tanya Dandrinos, SBS World News.
Authorities estimate the combined number of people now homeless in the widespread devastation is over 5 million, more than 1 million of those in Türkiye. Our reporter Claudia Farhat joins us now from the town of Osmaniye in the country's south. Good evening, Claudia. Tell us what's being done to address the monumental humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, Janice, it really is difficult to articulate the scale of this crisis. You can drive for hours and hours through southern Turkey, and the two constants you'll see are rubble and people living in tents. These are people who, up until just over a week ago, were living ordinary, normal lives. They've now been left with nothing. And in some of the camps we're visiting, the situation is deteriorating by the day. We've seen piles and piles of rubbish lined up right near where people are sleeping. Some of the bathrooms, portable bathrooms that have been brought in, are now incredibly unsanitary. And so the people who survived the earthquakes are now saying their greatest fear inside these camps is getting sick. In the Turkish city of Adıyaman, there was already a scabies outbreak, and that's known for circulating in these environments where people are living in close quarters. And across the border in Syria, there's cholera. Experts say the conditions there are now primed for an explosion in cases. We visited the Turkish city of Antakya earlier. It's only a couple hours south of here, and the situation there has become so desperate that we're now seeing hundreds of ordinary Turkish civilians leaving the safety of the north and travelling into the disaster zone to offer whatever help they can. The main road in Antakya is lined with destruction. But on this same street, the best of humanity is also on display, like these young men who drove 15 hours to offer help.
Biz buraya gönüllü olarak geldik. İnsanlara yardım etmeye geldik. Hem defin işlemlerinde gerekirse ölüleri çıkarmada yardım ettik.
In a city all but flattened by the earthquake, it's busy work.
Biz buraya insanlığa yardım etmek için geldik. İnsan olduğumuz için. Yani kendi memleketimizden olmasa da gelirdik buraya. Yani dediğim gibi insanlık namına buraya geldik. Yarın öbür gün bizim başımıza gelse eminim ki buradaki insanlar veya dünyadaki bütün insanlar bugün buraya geldiği gibi onlar da bize gelir. Yani insan insanın yanında olmalı her zaman.
He's not the only one who thinks so. All around this city, volunteers cooking meals, driving the injured to hospital and searching for the dead.
Amcaoğlunun kepçeleri vardı, onları getirdim buraya.
Erhan says he's prepared to stay here for as long as it takes. It's likely going to take months. There are a few people here that aren't missing at least one family member. Tujsalira's mother has been rescued. Her grandmother, uncle and cousins still trapped.
Yani yiyecek yardımı var, burada her şey var ama biz yiyecek yardım falan istemiyoruz. İnsanlar burada ölüme terk edildi. En azından ben insanların kurtarılmasını beklerdim yani. Hep ses var mı dediler. Hani geldiler, kontrol ettiler, ses var mı dediler. Ses yok deyip gittiler ama mesela başladılar kazıma. Genelde yaşayan insanlar da çıktı. Az önce çıktı. Yaklaşık bir 20 dakika önce yine bir canlı çıktı bizim enkazın karşısında. Onu da insanlar çıkardı.
This is Antakya's historic city centre. It used to be known for being vibrant and colourful, but it's now hard to find a single building here that hasn't been reduced to grey rubble. Those that are still standing are still being shaken by aftershocks, people say almost every hour. We've just felt another one. It's not the only reason people feel unsafe. This woman says she's worried disease will begin to run rampant in her camp. 1 week in and it's already squalid. Other families are taking turns to stand guard throughout the night, anxious about looting and violence. Thousands of Syrian refugees rebuilt their lives in this city over the past decade. They're now displaced twice over.
Savaş oldu. Bir de her şey zaten yıkıldı orada. Yani savaştan kaçtık. Zaten aynıdır yani. Yani çok yakın bir halimizde geldik. Yani savaşta çok yakın bir hale geldik bu yüzden.
But this destruction was dealt in just one day. A city that stood for 2,300 years, now in ruins. In Antakya, Claudia Farhat, SBS World News.
And Australia's disaster response team is still helping survivors in Türkiye after touching down on Sunday with specialist equipment and supplies. More aid shipments and community donations are also on their way to the disaster zones, with several leaving Melbourne today.